First Alert. Welcome to This Week in Kansas with your host, Tim Brown.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Kansas. Thank you for being with us this morning. The legislative session will be starting very soon, and it will, as always, be filled with challenges and debate between various senators and representatives. The budget, school finance, and religious freedom will all be hot topics. We'll take a look at a few of those in just a moment. Also, Kevin Yoder is taking a lot of heat over a measure that some say would allow banking bailouts to continue. And Congressman Mike Pompeo is our newsmaker this morning. We're going to start with our newsmaker, Congressman Mike Pompeo. Thanks for being on the program.
It's great to be with you, Tim. Thank you.
You know, we've had a lot of activity this last week or two, and a lot of important happenings in Washington, votes, and you're right there in the thick of all of it. The omnibus, I think, is probably the big one where we'll start. Again, as always, very controversial, but just tell us your thoughts. And I know you voted against, right?
I did vote against the bill. You know, we worked hard to get 9 new Republican senators elected so we'd have the majority. And unfortunately, this bill now locks in spending through September 30th of next year for almost the entire government. That's 38% of the time that the people of the 4th District of Kansas elected me, right? I have a 2-year term. And you saw this week, you saw the president take some actions this week. Now we've funded those things. We have no ability to go revisit them in a way without getting his signature. And so I think it was most unfortunate that we headed down that path. It was the last gasp, frankly, of Harry Reid and Barack Obama, right? It's the last chance for Senator Reid to impact policy. And we gave him 9 months worth of it when I think we could have given him 60 days and they wouldn't have had much option. It would have given us the opportunity to really go lead and do what the American people in Kansas demanded last November.
Why did that happen with the majority?
You know, I don't know the answer. I think Senator Reid was very clear that's what he wanted. He was demanding that. He then had some problems in his own party, folks who were walking away from it. There were some provisions in there that were good provisions. We got some provisions that matter to Kansas on EPA, and so there were some good things in the bill as well. I just think we could have done much better in January, February with a Republican United States Senate.
Yeah, so that's what you were hoping would happen. You could put it off for a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think we do better. I hope if we all worked awful hard to make it happen. If we can't do better in that configuration, then shame on us. Our leadership, our team, all the folks who believe in limited government and doing the good things that create jobs here in Kansas, now have the opportunity to have both House of Representatives and a Senate that understands that free market vision. And we need to go live up to the promises we all made in November when we got elected.
You mentioned the EPA in the state of Kansas. What happened there? Explain that to our viewers.
So there's a regulatory effort on the part of the Obama administration to regulate what they call waters of the U.S. It's an expansive definition of the ability of EPA to regulate in certain ponds and streams and the like. And this provision, at least for the next 9 months, the funding period, the EPA will be greatly restricted in the way they can do that as it pertains to Kansas farmers and Kansas livestock producers. So a good provision tucked into an awful lot of spending.
Well, water is always a huge issue here in the state of Kansas, as you're well aware, and yeah, I think there are a lot of farmers that are concerned about that, and groundwater issues as well. I want to shift gears for just a bit. There's so much that's happening in Washington, and we have so little time. Let's talk about Cuba for just a minute, because that's making the headlines all across the world, actually, here in these past few days. And President Obama he announced that he was going to open up relations with Cuba, try to normalize relations, and try to start some things up with Castro's brother. And there are some folks that are pretty vehemently opposed to that.
That would include me. Look, if you're a dictator, it's been a good month, right? The president has now extended the deal with the Ayatollah in Iran. Yep. We've now had a major production studio refuse to release a film because of a threat from the North Koreans, right? Basic, fundamental First Amendment rights that matter so much to you here at the TV station. And we now have rewarded Raul and Fidel, and they gave nothing. They got a murderer back and got a lot of money, a lot of wealth that will come to them. It's an enormous mistake. We are being watched all around the world. They now watch President Obama do this for months and months and months. And they now just hang on a little longer, and the president will write you a love note. And the next thing you know, you'll get your gift, your get out of jail free card. It's most unfortunate.
You know, the Cuba situation is interesting because if you look, and we were talking a little bit before the show, and I was reading some of the interviews with various folks, people who are refugees, in fact, a former mayor here in Wichita, and some of the other people who weren't too excited that this happened, and they really want to see bigger changes in Cuba before we normalize our relations. And I think the playing devil's advocate with you, some folks would, on the other side of the coin, would say, well, maybe if we normalize the relations, we can kind of get them to get in line.
I wish it were true. I wish I believed that that was the case. There's simply no evidence in the record that Mr. Castro is going to do anything of the sort. I heard from some of the local folks who are here. I heard from Representative Goyko. Haven't had a chance to talk to former Mayor Mayans yet. I'm sure that I will. But it goes broader than that. There are Kansas agriculture folks who desperately want to sell their products in there as well. I want them to also. But so long as the Castros are in power, there will be no wealth. There'll be no folks that can afford to purchase U.S. products. This is a country that they have made destitute and destroyed the basic dignity of Cubans for decades. I don't expect that to change. And so for us to hope that doing something like this is going to make them have a middle-class society that can purchase U.S. goods, I think is just foolish and dangerous as the rest of the world watches.
Now, this is not nearly as serious, but it is a serious issue, and you mentioned this just a moment ago, the Sony Pictures thing with the movie that the North Koreans were not big fans of, and they caved, quite frankly, and I saw that, I read that this week, and I was dismayed by that. I think you are as well. I have no clue about the movie, whether it's good or bad, and I don't think that really matters at this point, because they caved.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those situations where you think, what are we doing?
The U.S. government has the obligation to keep us all safe. And so there were threats made on movie theaters for Christmas Day. It is the U.S. government's job to keep us safe, or our local sheriffs or policemen, right? We do this task all the time. There's threats constantly in the newsroom. I don't understand why an organization like Sony, a big company, that has someone issue a statement would have taken this action. Make no mistake, there'll be copycats. Yeah. It'll happen again, and America's going to have to stand up. These threats are going to be constant. This threat from cyber attacks is something I've been working on since I joined the Intelligence Committee now a couple years ago. It matters an awful lot to Kansans, and it harkens back to when there were folks from these same studios being very critical when I was talking about making sure that our NSA had the resources to keep us safe, right? When Mr. Snowden leaked information, they said, well, that's a good thing that this information is out in the public, and now we're in a slightly different posture. And I only wish that our NSA had been able to stop this hack as well. It's a big threat to every citizen in the United States.
And perfect segue, I'm glad you brought that up, the cyber attacks and with your work and your position. Real threat, and people obviously are concerned with that, but you've got to wonder how credible the other half of the threat, and I think this is what they were worried about next, was the violence, and you got to wonder how credible that is.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but we should take all of those threats very seriously, whether they are issued from a hacker like this one, or from the North Korean government itself, or from ISIS. These threats from abroad are constant. We have to learn to deal with America. We have to learn to do it in a way that we can live our lives. We need to protect Americans' privacy while still keeping Americans secure. I think we can do all of those things. What we can't do is the first time someone issues a statement to say, we're just going to give up those First Amendment freedoms that so many of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines have worked so hard to protect for a couple of hundred years now.
Over a silly movie.
Over a silly movie.
Sets a dangerous precedent, doesn't it? Let's take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Senate torture report. Again, another big issue in the news. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
All men must die. Except him. The show's named after him.
Okay.
Gallivant, a 4-week comedy extravaganza. Premieres January 4th on ABC.
36 boys and girls teams, 18 high schools. One chance to prove we're way out of your league. It's the WATC Basketball Challenge, January 8th through 10th at Koch Arena. For matchups and team info, check out WATCBasketballChallenge.com. Brought to you by Wichita Area Technical College, Cakeland, Byte Magazine, and Intercom Radio. The WATC Basketball Challenge.
I made the switch. And so should you during our year-end clearance. At Schofield Buick GMC, it's time you experience a relaxed, friendly atmosphere, great customer service, and the best vehicles on the road today. During our year-end clearance, drive a new Buick or GMC for less. Drive a Terrain for just $169 a month, an Acadia for only $295, and the Enclave for just $399 a month.
We made the switch.
So come on in, take it for a spin, and switch to Schofield Buick GMC.
Nobody, and I mean nobody, sells Tempur-Pedic mattresses for less than the furniture store in Kansas and McPherson. The best-selling bed in America just got better with the addition of the Tempur-Pedic Air and Super Cool Breeze bed. Nobody has a bigger selection. We don't just stock catalogs. You can comfort test any Tempur-Pedic here. And free financing, free delivery, free setup, and free removal of your old mattress set.
We're the furniture store of Kansas in McPherson.
And thank you.
The EMC Cakeland Reading Caravan, awarding $500 grants to elementary libraries all across Cakeland.
If you know of a librarian or teacher you believe deserves recognition, you can nominate them at cake.com.
And welcome back. Congressman Mike Pompeo is our newsmaker this morning. Thanks again, Mike, for being on the program. We've talked about a lot of different topics so far this morning, but I wanted to get to the Senate torture report, which has been in the news significantly, and there are as with everything, there are kind of two schools of thought on this thing. The initial report said basically that the methods didn't elicit much in the way of credible information, but there are other folks that say, well, yeah, they really did, that this report was somewhat biased. Your thoughts?
So this report has made America less safe, and it has placed the men and women, some in uniform, some performing intelligence collection out of uniform, in grave danger. There was no net benefit from the release of this report. Most of these issues, these debates about waterboarding and all of those things that were contained, we've had those. And by the way, we can continue to have them. Debate seems appropriate to me. But there was no need to release the details. There was no need to release the locations. We've seen already this week, most of the folks in most of the countries have already been identified, despite the fact they had a little black line through them. It didn't take long to figure out who they were. And those men and women are at risk. Now folks know what programs they were part of, and they are also now making really difficult decisions. I spent a day out at the CIA on Friday, the Friday after the report was released, meeting with the men and women who were involved in making sure we were safe when America was demanding after 9/11 that we not permit 3,000 more people to be killed. And, you know, they ask hard questions, right? 10 years from now with a different Justice Department or a different president, will the things that I was demanded to do, the orders that I was given, will those be viewed as war crimes? And will I be prosecuted? This was a report that was incredibly dangerous for Kansans and for our national security.
Well, the net result of this, obviously, in your mind, is very negative. But you mentioned the debate is important. Reports like this fuel that debate. So there has to be a place for this type of information.
You know, Tim, we were having the debate without these details. It was known that America was waterboarding 3 folks, right? We knew about these enhanced interrogation techniques. The memos supporting them had all been released. There was no reason to go in and talk about particular locations and particular people. It didn't add to the policy discussion. You know, and you mentioned the effectiveness. So far as I can tell, 1 Senate Republican, maybe 2, the entire Democrat team that wrote the report, and no one else from a policy perspective that had anything to do with this program believes that we didn't get valuable information. I talked with Director Brennan. We've talked to we got important information that is to this day, not now 13 years after 9/11, we received information that to this day is valuable as we're thinking about how to continue to defeat Al-Qaeda. We got important information. Whether there was a particular fact led to a particular action, I think is difficult always to know, but make no mistake about it. These techniques were an important piece of America's efforts to keep all of us safe.
Report just partisan politics in your mind?
Worse than that. Worse than partisan politics. Partisan politics is just about winning elections. This was an act that put Americans at danger for I suppose some senator to feel good or to self-cleanse, a senator who knew about a program, who understood the scope of the program, and now walks away and says, I was never briefed, when in fact they were briefed. It's despicable.
Let's talk about GMOs for a second. This is another area where you've been heavily involved, genetically modified organisms, and we've had some labeling issues. What's the latest?
So we had a hearing this week in Washington, the first hearing for a bill that I've introduced, which is aimed at one simple task. It's to make sure that the price for ordinary Kansans to feed their family doesn't go up by $500 or $600 or $800 a year. You've now got lots of states and even cities passing these rules about how a genetically engineered product ought to be labeled. We'll end up with 50 or 100 or 200 different sets of rules. It'll make Kansas livestock producers and farmers spend an awful lot of money, and that will end up in the price of the food that families are trying to get for their families. The hearing was fascinating because there were 6 witnesses, 2 of which were Democrat witnesses that they'd identified, folks who think my bill doesn't make sense. Every one of the 6 witnesses acknowledged that genetically engineered foods are equally safe as those that are not genetically engineered. This issue of health safety, I think, was taken off the table. And now there's this question about what's the right way to approach how we communicate labeling. I think private companies ought to be able to decide. Today, if you want to know if the food you're eating has genetically engineered product in it, you can know. Buy those products that say no GMOs or say they're organic. I would never take that right away, and I'm glad people have the capacity to know. I just don't think big federal government ought to tell folks how to label this food.
And that's the point. I think what's lost in this debate oftentimes is the fact that you're not restricting, you're not asking that it's restricted. And if people do grow organic produce or foods, certainly label it that way. Label that you're non-genetically modified. Do whatever you want to do to let people know that you don't do that, but don't force the other side.
I think that's right, and we do that. We, as a historical matter, have required labeling only when there was a health or safety issue, right? So we have labels about how much salt is in the product. Sure. That always, and how much sugar. That makes me mad every time I get my Captain Crunch out in the morning. But we
I read
should,
that stuff real carefully. I don't follow it all the time, but I do read it.
I should do better as well. But if there's no health or safety issue, then we ought to allow private industries and individuals to make decisions about which food they want to consume, and different people will make different choices.
Great. Mike, anything big coming up that we need to know about in the coming months?
So we're not doing any harm. We're home from Washington for a couple more weeks till after the first of the year.
Look at it, I suppose.
Happy New Year's to you and Merry Christmas as well. We'll return in January and February, and we'll be moving on a whole bunch of things. The Keystone Pipeline, a whole handful of things that we couldn't get done with the Democrat Senate, and now hopefully we can work with the president and actually achieve those outcomes that will be really good for Kansas families.
I'm going to push this a couple of minutes because you mentioned the Keystone Pipeline. I do want to ask you kind of what the status is there. You're hoping in January to move something here?
Well, I'm confident we will. The House has passed the bill before. We went from 235 to now 247 Republicans, so we'll pass it again. My guess is we'll get 300 votes. We'll get a bunch of Democrat votes in the House as well, which is always great. On the Senate, it wouldn't shock me if we get 65. There'll be a bunch of Democrats supported. This is about continuing to drive towards energy independence and getting off of Middle East oil. We've seen the good things that come from that, right? I saw gas on the way in here. $2.22.
I need to drive down to Oklahoma and fill up my car. It's less than $2 a gallon.
So I think I saw $2.19 or $2.26 at different places along my drive here today. This is good stuff. The Keystone Pipeline is another piece of that, and we ought to continue to produce this energy right here at home, creating jobs and lowering the cost of energy for every Kansan.
Well, Mike, Merry Christmas.
Merry
I really
Christmas
do appreciate you coming by, and have a great new year. And we will take a commercial break. We'll be back with a whole bunch more stuff.
Celebrate 2015 with 15% off during Menards Bag Sale. Want a treat for your furry friend? Throw it in the bag. Need new tools? Put it in the bag. Getting low on batteries? Pack it in the bag. Want to give your walls a new look? Drop it in the bag. Stock up on this, save on that. No matter how you stack it, no matter how you pack it. The Menards Bag Sale has returned, so save 15% on anything you can fit in the bag. Sale ends January 4th. Some exclusions apply. See bag for details.
What's the big deal at Big Bob's Flooring Outlet? During their Happy New Floor Savings Spree, pick out a great deal on any new floor and receive an additional $200 instant cash discount. Plus, take it now and pay later. 1 year free financing. Choose from hundreds of carpet, hardwood, or laminate styles, now drastically reduced. Carpet, now 99 cents. Laminates, just 69 cents. Hundreds of in-stock specials while supplies last. Don't delay. Shop Big Bob's today and save.
Every day's a savings day. You can shop the savings way at Jabara's Carpet Outlet.
Every day is a savings day at Jabara's Flooring Superstore. You'll always save with our everyday low prices, but right now you can save up to 20% more on our huge inventory of remnants.
Every day is a savings day at Jabara's Carpet Outlet.
I made the switch.
And now it's your turn during the Schofield Hyundai year-end clearance. With 2 convenient locations, great customer service, and America's hottest lineup of vehicles, nothing compares to the value you'll find at Schofield Hyundai. During our year-end clearance, buy a new Elantra with 0 down for just $16,990, or receive 0% for 60 months plus holiday bonus cash.
It's time you make the switch.
So come on in, take it for a spin, and switch to Schofield Hyundai.
And welcome back. We are shifting gears a little bit, and we're kind of talking about state politics, and we're going to start off with our session preview, and we've got Kelly Arnold joining us here, and Chapman Rackaway's on the other end of the line via Skype. And let's start off with the session. It's just right around the corner. It seems impossible, but we are in December, and January, is it January 12th, I think? That's when
January 12th will be the first day.
I believe that is. So we're here. And I think, you know, some of the big things, budget obviously is going to be huge, school finance huge. We've got new committee chairs that were announced just this week. Religious freedom bill is popping back up, so all kinds of stuff to talk about. Let's start with budget. That's, I think, the biggest challenge right now that lawmakers are looking at as they head into the session.
Yeah, our lawmakers have a big task ahead of them this legislative session. I mean, there is a number of issues that they have to tackle. The budget is the first one, and that's going to be kind of divided up probably in 3 ways, because so far you've seen a little over $200 million in allotments and decisions that the governor's made. Some of those have to be then ratified by the state legislature, and so they're going to talk about that. If you saw the $40 million from Capers, it's been very controversial. I bet that's going to be fully vetted through the legislature to decide if that's the correct way to go.
Not a done deal.
Yeah, that is not a done deal yet. And then they're going to have to work on the actual budget, the upcoming budget. And one thing they did different under Governor Brownback's leadership is to move to a 2-year budget rather than just doing a year-by-year. So this would be the beginning of a 2-year budget they got to work on. And they have to tackle the budget issues as far as the less revenue that we've expected, and how do you trim down our state government, and what areas is going to get hit by that. And so they have that to figure out. And then what I think you're going to see them looking at with other pieces, which will be reforms, will be taking a longer look down the road. How can we make some changes now that's going to affect how we spend money and how we operate as a state, 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Chapman, Kelly just mentioned this, and I think this is a good point. We have some things that we can look at in the short term that we have to look at in the short term because we have to balance this thing by law. But we have to look at the long term at the same time, and it's looking challenging there as well.
Exceedingly so. And there's no place to look for that trade-off, I think, any better than the fact that to plug this budget hole that's coming up, Governor Brownback is relying somewhat on money from Capers, which he had spent a lot of political capital, spent a lot of time talking about Capers, how it needed to be better managed, they needed to put it on sounder financial footing, and to have done so and then use Capers' money to fill this budget hole seems a little sketchy, a little stopgap, and certainly inconsistent with how he had talked about it ahead of time. I'm sure Kelly has a different interpretation of that, but you wonder if that isn't taking a long-term risk for short-term gain. If you look at other states like California and Illinois, it is in unsecured pension and benefit monies that they're really facing their own fiscal cliffs coming forward. And so we've got to be sure that we're not going to fall into that same trap over the long term to fill some gaps in the short term. That's one of the big issues that the legislature has in front of it during this coming budget session.
Kelly and Chapman just talked about this. This is an area where Governor Brownback with Capers and the legislature really kind of pointed to as a success, as something that was very positive and rightfully so. And it does seem maybe a little bit disingenuous that now we're trying to take money back from the program.
Well, the legislature has made some changes. One of the things, January 1st of this year, we go to the cash balance plan for all new employees. And so that's one step. But the legislature is going to look at more long-term reforms with CAPERS. I mean, that is, it gets talked about every session. They've talked about going to more of a 457 style plan for 401k. And so they're going to talk about that. But the thing with CAPERS, and I'll disclose, I'm one of the trustees of CAPERS. And so anything I say is just my own personal opinion.
Sure.
But one of the things is we need to make sure that we have a fully funded CAPERS plan, and right now we're on the path to be fully funded by 2033. With the governor taking away $40 million of that this year, that sets us back a little bit. But if you look at this week, the stock market, the last 2 weeks, the stock market has been down, it's been up. The value of our fund swings more than $40 million every day.
Sure.
So this is just a very small portion of it.
Yeah, and I understand that it's a small, very small percentage, kind of a drop in the bucket, really, when you look at CAPERS. But if nothing else, it's kind of a perception issue. I think people see that and they think, oh my gosh, money's being taken away by the government again.
The members of trustee CAPERS are concerned that this is going to have an effect on their retirement, which it won't. It won't. Their plan, them being vested, their payout will not be affected by this.
Well, that's positive.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Religious Freedom Bill for a moment. And Chapman, I want to get your thoughts on this one first. This is something we saw last session. It was highly controversial. I think that's putting it lightly, and didn't have any success, actually. But folks are saying they're going to bring this thing up again.
And we'll see how they alter it. You know, there was some language in there that I think almost anyone looking at it fairly objectively would say it was blatantly unconstitutional. This was far too much overreach in that last bill. So they may be altering the language somewhat to make it a little stronger to survive a constitutional challenge, or it could just be that they think with an even higher number of conservative legislators in the state house, they might be able to get this through this time around. But it seems like more than anything, especially if you look at how the U.S. Supreme Court has been ruling of late, that any attempt to revive that religious freedom bill and any semblance to House Bill 2453 that went before the legislature last year, that's just lawsuit bait.
Kelly, the religious freedom bill, again, is one of those areas where I think a lot of times folks probably in your position would wish the lawmakers would shy away from some of these controversial things because they have a lot of other things that they have to worry about.
Yeah, and these are issues that can be used for or against somebody when they run for re-election. But we're in a different position than we were last time this came up. We've had a constitutional law get struck down. So the legislature is going to take a look at this. I do not know where this is going to go. I believe that they will take a look at the language that was originally introduced and passed by the House and see what needs to be changed. I do not know if this is going to go anywhere, but again, it goes back to this legislature has a mountain of issues that they need to tackle this session. Majority of it has to do with the budget, CAPERS reform, Medicaid reform, working on a 50-year water plan. So there are a lot of issues that need to be taken.
School finance is another area that I think is always a bit of a headache for folks.
Yeah.
And we're waiting for the second half of the lawsuit to be decided and announced.
Right.
Could be coming pretty soon.
We never know when they're going to go ahead and do their final ruling, but this is one of these issues where the legislature needs to take a good long look at what we can change in either the funding formula or however they want to do it, but make changes for the long term. We have had more studies and commissions and groups get together to look at this issue, and very little has actually been done. So it is finally time we need to take action to come up with a long-term solution that will fund our classrooms and also not put a huge hurt on our budget.
Yeah, Chapman, that is the challenge right there is how to do that without damaging the budget any further, and that's going to be a tall order.
That's exactly right. And all we've heard so far out of both sides have been platitudes. You hear Republicans saying that we need to do more with less, but they can't quite point out where any of the waste is that they're positing. And Democrats are just saying, well, throw more money at the problem. We aren't seeing any real substantive solutions for the school finance issue on either side, and there's certainly no willingness to compromise within the state legislature right now. You'd expect that this would be something that would then just kind of devolve back to the counties and the individual school boards, but last year the state legislature tied their hands in limiting the range in which they could adjust their local option budgets. So it almost seems like we are stumbling towards some kind of significant showdown on school finance, but the devil is going to be in the details, and we need to know from Republicans, we need to know, well, how are you going to make the money work, and are cuts going to be worse? Are we going to take Governor Brownback's advocacy for Texas to its logical conclusion, and we'll move more towards gaining revenue from a fee-based system? Or are they going to reverse course, which seems highly unlikely, and embrace what Democrats have been saying, which is that we need more money, and that means more revenue? None of the solutions that we've heard really seem even feasible right now. So until we start getting a little straighter talk out of a lot of folks in positions of authority, I think we're going to continue to have this mostly speculative conversation.
Well, and depending on the ruling by the Supreme Court, which and the timing of that, obviously it'll have a huge impact on the session, and I think will be the headline of the session yet again this year, and I just can't see how it would be otherwise.
And plus, like you stated, we have new committee chairs that are out, and education is one of those, and we don't know what the committees look like yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, we'll keep our eyes on the session as always, because there's always fascinating things happening there. Let's take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about Koch influence in the state politics. We'll be back in just a moment.
With the average bill for television service climbing to over $75 per month and everything from grocery to gas prices going up, we're all looking for ways to save some money. Brian Bluvis is here from Dish Direct to share some information on how to save money by switching to Dish Network.
Well, TV rates just keep climbing, and people are now realizing that there's a better option. Dish Network has the best value in TV entertainment with the lowest all-digital price nationwide. And when you realize the savings and the benefits, it just makes sense to switch.
Well, let's talk about some of those benefits. What are they?
Well, for starters, Dish Network has more HD channels available than any other provider. And the remote control is easy to use, and then there's the DVR, which everybody loves. And that allows you to pause, rewind, and record TV. Dish Network also offers the new multi-room DVR, so you can record in one room and then watch it in another.
I love that idea. Now, we mentioned that the cable rates are on the rise. What are the rates with Dish Network?
Well, Dish Network now has popular packages with all of your favorite channels, including locals, starting as low as $19.99 per month. And you get to lock in that price for 1 year. Wow. And if you call now, you'll receive all HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, and Starz channels free for 3 months and receive the activation and installation free.
I understand you have something special for our viewers today.
That's right, we do. The next 20 people that call us and order Dish Network service are going to receive a $50 Visa gift card that can be spent anywhere. And this is exclusive for phone orders only. So call 1-888-231-6489. It's really easy to set up over the phone, and we're usually able to do same-day or next-day installations. And this is a limited time offer, so please call now. Call 1-888-231-6489. That's 1-888-231-6489.
You know the quality of our Mennonite crafted dining room furniture. Now it's available even for your bedroom. Smooth opening, full extension drawers, English dovetail construction, no snag finish, and liquids leave no stain. Looking for high quality oak, cherry, or maple bedroom furniture? Look no further than the furniture store of Kansas and McPherson. Choose from one of our many finishes, free delivery and financing available. You're going to love the Mennonite quality, handcrafted bedroom furniture here at the furniture store of Kansas and McPherson.
And welcome back. After the last election cycle, there was a lot written and talked about concerning the Koch brothers and their influence in politics nationally and in the state. And we had Governor Brownback make a couple of comments just this last week about the influence or lack of influence from Koch on a state level. And you know, I think when people look at elections and they you know, things may not turn out the way that they had hoped, they want to point a finger, and Kochs are
an easy target.
Pretty easy to point a finger at, I suppose.
You for the last couple years have heard Democrats, even Harry Reid on the Senate floor, just bash about how evil the Koch brothers are, and they try to use that as a theme to turn out their vote against Republicans, and what they found out is it really didn't work. You then take a look at the state level thinking, oh, Koch's got it, you know, they're from Wichita and they must have a lot of influence in Kansas politics. And the reality of it is they are not that involved in Kansas politics. I mean, from a local level to a state level.
Well, and that's something I'd always kind of been curious about. I knew they were involved in national politics and pretty openly so. So I don't know that you can criticize them too much for that. I mean, if you believe something and you want something to happen and you have the money to help make it happen, I mean, I guess I don't know that you really blame them for that, but I've never really heard much about involvement from on a state level.
And they really aren't. A lot of people tried to point at them with this tax reforms that were going on in the state that the Governor Brownback has implemented, and you find out, you know, most of that had to do with LLCs, and there are very few parts of Koch Industries that's an LLC. I had to laugh when it was probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're debating the education bill that they passed this past year. And the Twitter, and in fact, I think it was Jim Ward that had put this out there, said he heard the Koch brothers were in the Capitol in Topeka, you know, lobbying to try to get this bill. And I'm like, I just had to laugh at that because I'm like, they have no interest as a Koch Industries on what the education bill was. And so people just like to come up with this idea that the Kochs are involved in everything. And why they have a great company here, they got a lot of employees that do a lot of great work, but the actual involvement in lobbying in Topeka or even on a local level is very little.
Well, next time Jim's on the show, I'll have to ask him about that and give him a hard time.
Oh, yeah.
Chapman, I want you to get your thoughts on the Koch brothers and their influence in Kansas politics.
Yeah. Well, and we again are kind of going back and forth between two extremes here, saying either they're not involved or they're these Machiavellian manipulators moving the marionette strings behind the scenes. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle, and that's certainly the case here. Are they influential? Of course. They're Kansan. They've got a lot of money. They have access to a lot of people. They have the ears of a lot of important people. Now, where we kind of go off the rails there is when we assume that that means control. Influence isn't control. The Kochs have influence, most certainly. Do they have control? No, because when it comes right down to it, they're one of any number of players, including the voters, including other organized interests, and so on. And their voice, they might be able to amplify that a little bit louder than some others. But truly, they're only one of any number of players, and you can't simply cozy up to the Kochs and expect that everybody else is just going to fall in line. If only politics were that simple, but it is certainly not. And one thing that Kelly pointed out that I think is really important is that most of their interest is in D.C. If you look at things just as a matter of what folks of their scale and their business interests need to have their fingers in, what's going on in D.C. is much, much more important to their interests, generally speaking, than the stuff that happens here in the state of Kansas. So these are smart men. They understand return on investment. So they're going to be focused on what's going on in Washington, D.C. Now, the other thing to bear in mind here is that when it comes to the Kochs or anybody else, because of the reforms that we've had in campaign finance, specifically things like Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act or McCain-Feingold of 2002, we've taken so much of money that we could trace and really identify the areas of influence, especially at the federal level. We've driven it underground. We've made it non-disclosed, and we've gotten it to the point where we don't even know who's necessarily influential and who's not, because all of these dark money groups can avoid disclosure. We don't know who they are. So we're all kind of fumbling around in the dark when it comes to actually who is, based on their money, having what proportion of influence in any kind of circumstance in the federal legislature right now.
And Chapman, you know, I think the point needs to be made too that whether you agree with the Kochs or not, they feel pretty strongly. They have strong beliefs, political beliefs, and they do have the wherewithal and the money to do certain things. And why can you blame them for that? There are folks on the other side of the aisle that do exactly the same thing. They may not be quite as wealthy as
you
the
have
Kochs.
George Soros.
Well, they get a disproportionate amount of attention, partly because people like Harry Reid have decided that they're convenient bogeymen to go after. But someone, a blogger, I believe is Gateway Pundit, did an analysis of the top industrial 100 contributors to campaigns through 2008 to 2012, and found that the Kochs were somewhere in the top 100, but outside of the top 50. So particularly because they have such Kansas ties, we tend to think of them as the political 800-pound gorilla. But that's simply not the case. Like I was saying, they're one of any number of different groups. And as you've heard from me say this quite a few times on this show, there's two types of ways to share your voice in politics: directly and with your wallet. Both are certainly understandable and acceptable. Can we blame the Koch brothers for getting involved in politics? No. They've got a ton of skin in the game. They have a lot at risk from how government's going to regulate, government's going to tax, and so on. There's nothing wrong with them spending their money. In fact, if you were to shine that light on left-leaning groups and call them out, concomitantly, that would be a little bit fairer, but there tends to be a disproportionate bit of attention paid to the Kochs, and I think that's particularly acute here in Kansas because of their Wichita ties.
Well, and I think it's smart politics, quite frankly. You mentioned Harry Reid using the Kochs kind of as a target, and Kelly said to help get votes, and it's just good politics. That's politics. That's all that is. I do want to mention, speaking of the Kochs, as we talk about them a little bit, WSU donation just this week, 11 million some odd. Yep, a lot of money.
A lot of money.
11 and a quarter.
Yeah,
I'm being told in my ear, but a lot of money. Biggest one-time donation, single donation in WSU history. So that was nice, and I think a lot of that is going towards some entrepreneurial efforts there on campus.
And it's very good. They have been great for this community, and not just this community, but you know, across the nation. David Koch has given a lot of money, and it's great that we have Charles and his family here supporting our local university. They've been there for a number of years. For them to continue to invest in our kids, as they stated, they hire you know, I think close to 100 students every year at Koch Industries, and we need to continue to churn out bright kids, and this is one way that they can give back.
All right, let's take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to discuss Kevin Yoder and banks and what has people all been out of shape there. Be back in a couple of minutes.
Every day's a savings day. You can shop the savings way at Jabara's Carpet Outlet.
Every day is a savings day at Jabara's Flooring Superstore. But right now, you can save an additional 5 to 25% on selected red tag items throughout our store.
Every day is a savings day at Jabara's Carpet Outlet.
I made the switch. And now it's your turn during the Schofield Hyundai year-end clearance. With 2 convenient locations, great customer service, and America's hottest lineup of vehicles, nothing compares to the value you'll find at Schofield Hyundai. During our year-end clearance, buy the all-new redesigned Sonata with 0 down for just $19,990, or the Santa Fe for just $23,990.
We made the switch. So come on in, take it for a spin, and switch to Schofield Hyundai.
Nothing makes a better first impression than a beautiful entryway. Mastercraft is known for creating energy-efficient doors that look great and are built to last a lifetime. Stop into Menards today to find the right door for your home. We have styles and designs for everyone. Mastercraft doors are durable and have thousands of options to choose from. Right now, all special order interior and entry doors are on sale. This 6-panel door in oak or pine is just $88 after rebate.
Save big money at Menards.
Don't answer that phone if you've been in a car wreck.
And don't talk to the insurance company until you know you're right.
I got in a car wreck and the insurance adjusters kept calling me, so I called the two Bryans.
I'm Brian Pistani, president of Pistani Law Offices for 23 years.
I'm Brian Collicon. We're the two Bryans. We got our clients over $55 million in the past 5 years.
The two Bryans, they got me my settlement. They got me my money.
Nothing to it. We're the original Pistani Law Offices.
The two Bryans, been here all along, still getting the big settlement.
Triple 4 win big.
Welcome back. Kevin Yoder has received a lot of email in these last few days, and a lot of it negative. And he wants people to know that what people think and what this little bill does are two different things. Yeah. And we're talking about banks and regulation. And you know, Kelly, this is a challenging area because I think when people look at this, they think of the financial crisis, they think of financial institution bailouts that made a lot of people mad, and they see Kevin Yoder as opening the door for that again.
Yeah, what you read in the paper was an article about the congressman and where his contributions came from and whether or not he was doing anything in favor of the banks. To even get into that is kind of not worth the time, because it's more important about whether he did something, whether or not he got financial backing from somebody, whether he'd do it with the financial backing or without the financial backing. And what he proposed was and got passed was an amendment at 716. And what this did is it repeals part of the legislation from Frank Dodd Act that deals with derivatives. And when you say the word derivatives to most people, they don't even know what you're talking about. No. And I think what happened was people rushed to the conclusion that this is repealing part of the effort where the banks were bailed out, or it's going to harm or allow banks to do more harm. It has nothing to do with that. This deals with local banks, community banks, the farming community. It allows a farmer who would go to a bank and get a loan to produce his product, his grain, wheat, and get a credit swap or a swap with that same bank to protect in case the market goes down. This legislation says he can no longer go back to the same bank he got his loan from. You now have to go to a different bank. Yes.
We want to make
yes.
sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yes, his amendment. And so the other thing is the legislation has been repealed from this, has not even gone into effect yet. And so it's a good thing he did it now. I also want to point out he ran this bill in the past term and as an individual bill, and it got bipartisan support. It got basically all the Republicans plus about 70 Democrats. And so this is nothing that the Democrats had an issue with. It was bipartisan, and it's legislation that repeals a bunch of regulation that we don't need.
Now this was an amendment to the omnibus, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the president signed it
yes.
as well. Chapman, hop in on this one and give us your thoughts on this amendment and the value or the danger of it.
A lot of it is optics. There's really not a lot of taxpayer money at risk here, and Kelly's kind of sharing the Kansas-centric concept there about the farmer. But what it also allows banks to do is basically bet on bad loans with other banks. Now, this was part of that derivative market, and that's what led partially to the financial crisis in 2008, although that involved mortgages. This involves all loans, so it's an even wider scale kind of issue. But because it doesn't just involve mortgages, it involves bank accounts. The Federal Deposit Insurance Commission is involved in this, and they get their money from bank fees rather than from taxpayer money. So we wouldn't see as much taxpayer money exposed in this as we did in 2008 because of the mortgage security that was given by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And for those that we haven't already lost with all of this technical information, because taxpayer money isn't involved. This is more out of a fear of the 2008 problems recurring and the optics of it, rather than this being a real return to, or I shouldn't even say a return to, a regulation-free environment. This is only tinkering with Dodd-Frank a little bit. And even folks like when Greg Orman was running, one of the biggest policy pronouncements he was making was how much reform needed to be in Dodd-Frank, because it had over-regulated so many. So this is something that when you don't have Democrats who are about to lose their majority in the Senate retrenched, they kind of recognize, we should do some of these changes to Dodd-Frank. So a lot of this seems more about the campaign season messaging than it does the actual substantive policy.
Kelly, we're adjusting the dial on Dodd-Frank a little bit,
yes.
It sounds like. And you know, how will this impact people? Will this make it easier to get loans, give loans, that kind of thing as well?
For the average person, it's not going to impact them at all. What it's going to be able to do is make business easier for the bank and the merchant within a transaction dealing mainly with loans. You know, he talked about derivatives. This is derivatives. This does not affect the derivatives that cause part of the financial meltdown. Those are with the CDOs and other things out there. This doesn't affect that. So this is not going to. This is where people were scared that we're going to go back to the old days and allow the big banks to make these big plays where they're buying and selling bad credits. But this is not it. It will help and make lives easier, cheaper, and reduce the regulation.
Okay, let's take another commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the KCC approving Chanute broadband and why that is somewhat controversial. Yeah.
We made the switch, and so should you during our year-end clearance. At Schofield Buick GMC, it's time you experience a relaxed, friendly atmosphere, great customer service, and the best vehicles on the road, like the new 2015 Denali's in stock now. During our year-end clearance, save up to $11,000 on the Sierra, or drive a 2015 for just $199 a month.
We made the switch to GMC.
So come on in, take it for a spin, and switch to Schofield Buick GMC.
All men must die. Except him. The show's named after him.
Okay.
Gallivant, a 4-week comedy extravaganza. Premieres January 4th on ABC.
It's that time of year again. Open enrollment for Health Insurance Marketplace from November 15th through February 15th. Hunter Health Clinic certified navigators will help you find a plan that's right for you and your family, or help you look for a new plan with better coverage at lower cost. Financial assistance is available for those who qualify, and no one will be denied for a pre-existing condition. Enroll by December 15th. Your plan can start as soon as January 1st. Call Hunter Health Clinic today at 316-491-7601. Hunter Health Clinic, completing the circle of health.
You can still get exactly what you want this holiday during Happy Honda Days.
I got a CRV with a higher safety rating than Escape and Equinox.
Don't miss year-end clearance, where you can get a new Honda with 0 down, 0 security deposit, and 0 first month's payment.
No money down. Now I can get a gift for myself.
Drive a new Civic with better mileage than Focus and Corolla, now just $149 a month.
When you can get the gift you really want during year-end clearance.
Why settle for less than a Honda?
Happy Honda Days is ending soon at your Kansas Heartland Honda dealer.
What do you think of Wichita? I love it. Being from Phoenix, I wanted to live in like a more spread out town. And driving around here, I'm like, this is like Phoenix. The streets are really wide. It's set up like grid paper. I'm like, I will never get lost.
Watch Jamel, Frank, and Gloria weekday mornings on Good Morning Kansas.
And welcome back. The Kansas Corporation Commission has approved broadband for Chanute, and you know, it seems like kind of a simple thing on the surface, but there were some issues, particularly when this all started. I think there were some lawsuits and some efforts to block this from happening, and for a variety of reasons. And Kelly, at first blush, I would look at this and I would think, well, why would that be controversial? I mean, it's a small town that wants internet service.
Yeah. You look at this and you have a city government that is going to go ahead and put in a utility, and you already have, which is AT&T in Chanute, providing a service. What brought the attention to this is a 1947 state statute that says if you're going to issue IRBs, that is you have a public company already out there providing that service, and a private company providing that service, it has to be approved by the Kansas Corporation Commission. And that's what they did this week. And you got to step back and look at it. Should the city be involved with providing an internet service? You look at Wichita or Johnson County or someplace like that, and I'd absolutely say they should not be involved in that. But most people may not even know, in good parts of Kansas, you only have dial-up. I mean, there's no high-speed internet. So for Chanute to take the initiative to provide a better service that's 14 times faster than what AT&T can provide, I believe it's only $40 a month, which I think is like 60% cheaper than what AT&T can provide. I kind of sit there and say, you know, maybe Chanute ought to look into this.
A little competition for AT&T, Chapman. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, let me tell you that at a conference I attended and participated in about 8 years ago, I was told by one of the regional directors of rural telephone that we actually have 100% broadband diffusion here in Kansas. I can't think of any communities that are relying on dial-up. But what I think Kelly is pointing out is the fact that where so many communities have only a single service provider, and you look at downpipe speeds for most communities here in the United States, we lag far below that of other countries. What Google Fiber did in Kansas City, basically Chanute is just trying to mirror in its own town, because the utility and protectivist nature that keeps AT&T the sole provider in one place and allows them to charge higher prices and provide lower download speeds. But someone from Chanute goes to Kansas City, sees what Google Fiber has for them there, they go home, they want that same kind of concept. So we're seeing disruptive technology coming in and hopefully breaking up some of these local monopolies or duopolies in internet provision. Chanute just took it upon itself as a city, which one of the things Kelly points out that's quite right is that you would hope that a private provider would step in and do this rather than a community, but the community chose to do it, and they're certainly in a position where they can go ahead and they can compete. If that provides competition that pushes AT&T to provide better prices and better service, then that seems to me that that's in the spirit of capitalism.
Well, yeah, I think we're kind of walking a fine line on this one, because you don't know when a community provides the service, do you count that as capitalism? Most folks wouldn't, but this might give AT&T the little kick in the pants to get them.
It will create competition, which that's good. Creating competition is a good thing. And it's good to know that everybody in Kansas does have access to broadband, because that is not the same in most states.
Yeah, well, and I tell you, in some parts of Kansas, and I know it's a little different, but in my travels, I have found some very slow internet speeds and very expensive internet as well. So we'll see what happens there. And hats off to the folks in Chanute. I hope it works out. Maybe AT&T will step up to the plate as well and try to be a little bit more competitive, because I would think with Chanute doing this, AT&T will lose a lot of business in that area. Kelly, we've just got a few seconds left in the program. Session starting, budget the biggest thing, school finance, anything else you can think of?
Those are going to be the two big ones. There's a lot of other cleanup things that need to be done, but they got a mountain to tackle.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Thanks for being on the program. Chapman, thank you for being on as well. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please email me at thisweekinkansas@cake.com. I hope you have a wonderful week and a Merry Christmas.
2014, Cake News has been with you every day of the